evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Joel Weissman. The governor's race got a little more heated this week. Comptroller Dan Hines takes a shot at Governor Quinn at the State Fair. Chris Kennedy, head of the Marchandise Mart, decides not to run for the U.S. Senate. Longtime Sun-Times columnist and Joliet native Robert Novack succumbs to brain cancer. Uptown residents upset with Alderman Schiller over rising violence.
Chicago, 2016.
Chicago learns its Olympic fate in just 6 weeks.
Cutler steps up under pressure, lets it fly for Hester, and it's intercepted.
The Jay Cutler era of the Chicago Bears is off to a rough start in the preseason.
He's got to throw a strike here. It's Goff deep to center. Maybe not a strike like that. Leaping attempt off the wall.
And the struggling Cubs falling further behind the first-place Cardinals. Joining us on this edition of the Week in Review are Esther Cepeda of the Chicago Sun-Times, David Greising of the Chicago Tribune, Bruce Dold, also of the Tribune, and Mike North of Comcast Sportsnet. First tonight, politicians stumping at the State Fair. Governor Quinn signs a reform law. Merchandise Mart head Chris Kennedy decides not to run for political office. And Sun-Times great Robert Novack dies. Bruce Dold, what do you make of the charges and counter-charges at the State Fair between Governor Quinn and Dan Hines?
This could be one of the most fun political years we've seen in a long time. So if you're a Republican, you're thinking this is great. You've been on the outs for all this time. The best thing that could happen for you is the Democrats are fighting in August of the year before the election. So you got Dan Hines, who, as comptroller, you don't have much of a record. And you got Pat Quinn, who is trying to fumble his way around in just a few months in office.
And what about the quality, though, of the charges? Hines says, Quinn, you have to earn it.
Well, what Quinn ought to be telling Hines is, what's your budget? Exactly how would you handle this? And Dan Hines is kind of taking some pot shots, but he's also very much favored by labor. I don't know that Dan Hines, is going to turn around and say we're going to cut 5%, 10% of the state budget, which you might actually have to do. So, Quinn's got to put it on Hines to step up and say, how would you be doing this job?
Well, are we the only ones who are talking about this at this time, or do you think this is really going to blossom into something? I mean, it seems to me the State Fair charges back and forth compared to the health care debate and some Afghanistan vote and other things.
This is going to be a 4-week election. It's an election in early February. Nobody's going to be paying attention really until after the first of the year, and then you're going to have 4 weeks to run for governor and the Senate.
Mike North, I know you follow politics closely. Yeah. What do you want to know if you could ask questions of these two Democrats?
Well, first of all, I like them both because I know both, and I think Pat Quinn was known as a reformer. Now he's in the hot seat, so things tend to change a little bit. I would ask Pat Quinn, are you really serious about the things you want to do? I mean, he says he wants to do these things. And how is this going to affect him? He's the guy that's in, I think, the odd position. He's got to make all the moves, and Hines can cherry pick as he wants.
Well, one of the moves he made, David Greisinger, is going to make is he's going before the Democratic pre-slate making committee. And as a reformer, what do you make of that?
Well, it is odd to see him do that. You can't, if you would have thought 3 or 4 years ago that Pat Quinn would have done that, been told that he would have done that, we would have really scratched our heads. But he realizes that he's up against the establishment. Dan Hines, really, son of Tom Hines, a family name in politics in Illinois for a very long time. And now that he's governor, it's hard for him to kind of pull the outsider thing anymore. He's got to win on the inside as well.
So Esther Cepeda, if he doesn't get the endorsement, will he then label Hines as the machine, regular Democratic guy?
I don't know. It's what's interesting to me is that Chicago is such a personality politics kind of watching this play out.
Okay, so who has the better personality?
Well, that's just the thing. That's what's interesting about it. They're both kind of tepid, So I can't imagine either of them really going after each other.
One of two things. Right? Slate making is one of the great circuses in town. All the Democratic committeemen want to hear is what you've done for the Democratic Party. So Quinn can go in there and say, "I'll be a real Democrat," or he can go in there and kind of show them up and figure he's not going to get a nomination.
Has he always been a real Democrat? Has he always been a real Democrat?
Obviously not.
Right.
But you say both of them are pretty tepid. I'm going to show you a list here of some people that are very, very tepid, at least up till now. These are the 6 Republican candidates for governor so far. And Bruce, if you look at the monitor there, only 2 of those names stick out, Bill Brady and Kirk Dillard. I don't think that many people know Adam Andrzejewski. And here are 3 more. Matt Murphy and Dan Proft and Bob Schillerstrom, who was from the DuPage County Board.
Truth is, we know some of these people. Most people don't know any of them. I mean, if you're a state senator, you probably overestimate how much people actually know you. And so, you know, even a guy like Bob Schillerstrom has been the DuPage County Board Chairman. Nobody knows him outside of the county. Kirk Dillard has been in politics forever, but he's not going to have high name recognition.
Yeah, but he might, because he is the guy who did the commercial for President Obama.
Right. And so if the best thing you can do in a Republican primary is say you endorsed a Democrat who became president.
Can't he say he's bringing everybody together?
The National Republican Party's in bad shape, but it's not in as bad shape as the Illinois Republican
Yeah, but
Party.
yet isn't this a golden opportunity for the state Republican Party?
Yeah, it is. And I think if you're Kirk Dillard, you can say, look, I was aligned. I worked for Jim Edgar, the last honest governor in the state of Illinois, and that's probably a selling point.
You better have a picture of him so people remember. Seriously.
Let's go over to another story, which is the Senate side. And, of course, we have a Democratic primary between Cheryl Jackson and Giannoulias, the treasurer. Who seems to be ahead in that one?
I think Alexi Giannoulias wants everybody to think that he's the anointed candidate, that there's an inevitability to him. I think Cheryl Jackson could be a really appealing candidate. The business community likes her. She's done a good job with the Urban League. I don't know that we know that field yet. I think there's some scuttlebutt that maybe someone like Valerie Jarrett may leave the Obama administration and come back and run. I don't know that Giannoulias has played up his ties with Obama. Obama, certainly he wasn't his candidate. Obama wanted Lisa Madigan to run for the seat. So
right, but he does play basketball with Obama.
I wouldn't be surprised if we get somebody else in the race.
Chris Kennedy of the Marchandise Mart, and of course a Kennedy family, has decided once again that he does not want to run for office. Why do we pay so much attention to him?
Well, because he's a candidate. He's a thoughtful guy. He's an accomplished guy. He has run the
How do we know he's thoughtful?
Mart. I'd go out and talk to him. I've just in conversation with him. I think
he's not very accessible, and he's first is mentioned for governor, then he's mentioned for the Senate. Why did he decide to opt out?
I think he was, Dave, what would you think? I think he was waiting for a shot where he had a clear, I don't know that he wants to run in a primary.
I also think maybe the Caroline Kennedy experience was a little bit of an eye-opener for him, because he's not been a public person. He's very well regarded, the way he's run the Mart. He's been involved in the community a lot, so the insiders in the state know him well and have a lot of regard for him. But just as his sister kind of flopped when she went public and tried to ask people for votes.
In private conversation, he's gracious, he's smart, but you never know how anybody's going to be when they have the cameras on and they're a candidate for the first time.
Nobody really knows him, Joe. Yeah. I mean, people that
Bruce knows him.
Bruce knows him, but mainstream Chicago, they don't really know him.
I agree.
They really don't.
A journalism great, you might not have agreed with his views, died this week. Robert Novack. He worked for the Sun-Times for many, many years. That was his home paper. What did you think about Bob Novack?
Well, I mean, he was a star, and as I said, he was a star because he made the reporting and he made the subject that he was talking about the star, and he, everybody looked to him all over the country, and he was just incredible, and he's going to be really missed.
David?
Well, I think he was the star. I don't think the stories he made were the star.
But that's what made him the star.
Right. Well, he kind of invented the Shout Fest talk show, Crossfire, which had its age and seems to have passed a little bit. And I guess there's not that much back and forth.
The whole cable
What's different is he used to actually have an exchange of views on his shows, and now it's all siloed. You either have very liberal shows or very conservative shows. Thanks in part to the rise of Fox News, and so it's completely different. I think his approach was probably better, where people actually had to match wits and argue on some of the real issues.
But isn't it interesting that you're arguing that he'll be remembered most for television? Well, Bruce, do you think that's the case?
I'm old enough to remember Evans and Novack when he was primarily known as part of the political column, muckraking political insider column, and he was a heck of a column, a heck of a team. He made the transition before anybody really did, and he was early making that transition into TV, and is certainly much better known because of the TV persona than he was when he was an ace political
and when
reporter.
He was an ace political reporter, I mean, those guys, Evans and Novack, used to break news 4, 5, and 6 days a week. They'd always have some nugget. He has, in his autobiography, The Prince of Darkness, he mentions your moderator as having gotten a scoop for the Washington Post one time.
That's great.
But he was not necessarily a very well-liked person.
I don't know, Wayne got a bad rap on the Valerie Plame case, right? Because everybody thought that it was either Cheney or Bush that he was taking his marching orders, from the White House, and it turned out that it was, the State Richard Armitage, who was considered a liberal Republican, who would actually fed it to him.
There's no such thing as a liberal Republican. They're moderate Republicans.
Right, moderate Republican, and a Colin Powell supporter.
Novack also endowed some scholarship at the University of Illinois, from which he was where he attended.
I'm sure the trustees will have their people check into that job. Wow.
Well, he will be missed. We're going to go over to the crime beat, Chicago's uptown area, the latest neighborhood grappling with rising violence. Residents protest against Alderman Helen Schiller. Just how can police stem the violence? And Esther, if you notice in Lakeview now, they have redeployed more police in the overnight hours because apparently there's been a surge in some robberies early in the morning.
Sure. I mean, I think the chief complaint's going to be that there are other areas of the city that need it as well, but this is well publicized. I think that the media has been doing a very, very careful job of not overplaying this whole component of not overplaying this component of the black versus white, the poor versus, the haves versus the have-nots. As I was mentioning earlier, the crime rates that are going on in the summer, obviously there's a lot of violence, but I think it's incredible that there's not more violence with the economic downturn. I don't know if it's because it hasn't been that hot out, but it just hasn't been as bad as it has been during the July and August months in years past.
But if you were a reader or a television viewer, you might think that it's worse than it ever's been, and partly because of what you say, that the media now is super sensitive and they want to show all crime, not just crime in white areas.
Sure, and I think that is the perception, and the statistics bear it out that in some places it's gone down, in some places it's gone up, but the story is just, continual violence.
You don't read about crime in Edison Park, or you don't hear about crime in Norwood Park, and they're white areas. It's affluent white areas, or areas that are supposed to be on the come, that is drawing the focus of people, and that's disturbing. It happens during a recession, like Esther was saying. The poor people are going, oh my God, where do we go now? And the criminals are saying, we got to go somewhere else to get our money because it's not accessible here.
But what about her statement, and I guess it's backed up by statistics, that crime is actually down, but it seems to be covered more like it's up?
I think people want you to cover it. I mean, I think they want to know. I don't think people understand how many kids get killed in the city unless you pay attention to them. I remember years ago when we did Killing Our Children in the Tribune, when people were astonished to find out how often children died, and it wasn't whether the numbers were rising or falling that much. It was just pay attention to
the individual stories are heart-wrenching, but do we really have any new ideas as to how to combat this?
Chicago's murder rate fell dramatically, and partly because we put more cops on the dots, we put more focus on high crime areas, we did more intervention like ceasefire, which then lost its funding, and I think we've seen some of that get pulled back. So I think we did see New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, you've seen that there are ways to fight this, and overall the crime rate is down.
Do we need more police?
Well, we're not going to get them, are we?
Well, I'm asking you, do we need them?
It's more police on the street is the issue, is get people out on the street, get them to those high crime areas, deploy them where they can do some good, because that has shown an effect, and also get the community involved. You've got Pastor Flager getting involved in this issue and trying to really highlight it. That when the police work with the community.
Do you think he's effective?
I think he's effective at raising awareness and trying to empower the people to feel like they can fight back, even in some of these bad neighborhoods.
But is it fighting back to march down the street and say, stop crime?
It's fighting back to be more aware, to phone in when you see something you don't like.
But people aren't phoning in some of these areas.
They had somebody killed in front of the church, not far from there.
I mean, how do you get people to get involved without those people being at risk?
I would think if you live in the neighborhood of Father Flager's church, it drives you crazy when you see all the attention to a few muggings in Lincoln Park, because this is happening every single day in your community.
How do you think you get people involved?
Well, I mean, you have to have the Flagers out there whipping people up out of apathy, because there's a certain point at which you think that the violence is so bad that you can't overcome it.
What happens if you're the mother of a gangbanger, and you know that your son is involved with some people, or knows some people who've done some shooting? Are you going to call the police?
Maybe, maybe not, because a gang problem.
Let's take it. Well, the maybe yes. What would make you do it?
fear that I or my other children in my family were going to get immediately affected by it, and that would probably be the only thing, because gang violence is such a it's just permeated within communities.
And the maybe not is you'd fear that
and
if
the
they
maybe
found
not
out
is
you
the
snitched,
exactly it's the retribution. It's like you
can take the money out of drug dealing. I mean, so much of it is tied to that, but we haven't figured out how to take that money out yet.
Well, it's a daunting problem. In other news this week, Chicago's Olympic dreams are in the home stretch. The city that works takes a furlough day, and Congressman Jackson holds a town hall meeting on health care here. Let's talk about the health care meeting that Congressman Jackson had. I thought it was noteworthy because there weren't too many people who were against Obama's health plan.
No, he actually got to speak a little bit. Nobody was shouting at him. Nobody was chasing him out of the room, etc. It was the town hall meeting, like kind of an old-fashioned town hall meeting, actually exchanges of views. I don't know what went wrong. I don't know why whoever it is that's mobilizing these shouters and Obama birth deniers to come out to these meetings. The woman in Boston earlier this week who asked if this was a Nazi program to Barney Frank. I mean, things have just gotten completely out of control.
She was with the libertarians who put a mustache on Obama to make him look like Hitler.
Right. Well, there's just all kinds of crazy stuff going on, so it's kind of refreshing to actually see a town hall meeting on this very important topic. The trouble is that with all the shouting that's gone on is this is one of the most important public policy topics of our lifetimes, and it's being really the kind of discussion of it is being destroyed by the fact that you can't go to a meeting and actually have an exchange of views.
Yeah, but wait a minute. Hold on. It's not just the meetings. This guy, President Obama, has been trying to explain this health care plan for about a month and a half. I watch on TV every single night. I haven't been to one town hall meeting, and I'm still trying to figure out what it is they're trying to do. I don't think you're right. It's amazing to me when the Democrats organize, it's an organized thing when they go to meetings. When the Republicans go, it's a mob. I mean, I get a kick out of that. They differentiate. Sure, there's people yelling because they don't want to lose what they're happy with. Apparently, the president's not explaining this program right. They've changed it up too many times.
Do you know what the public option is?
No.
You have no idea what the public option is?
No, listen, here's what I got. Hospitalization, I'd like to have my own hospitalization. Would I like the option? Is that what we're talking about here? To do it, fine. Do I want to rely on the government alone on taking care of me? I'm not sure about that.
There's a lot of legitimate fear and a lot of legitimate confusion about this, and I think they have sold it badly, and I think they need to come down and focus on, say, maybe 2-3 things. This is what we want to try and do, and they need to pare this down.
And
but how can, excuse me, how can you keep it simple if the answers are yet unknown?
You can say this is how we're going to guarantee that everyone has the access to insurance. So this is how we're going to guarantee that you can actually keep your insurance. That's not guaranteed at all. That you can keep the insurance you have now.
That's the biggest problem. The fact that at this late stage of ongoing debate, we don't really know that clearly what the options are. The Obama administration has really done a poor job of selling this to the American people.
Esther?
And I think they've done a terrible job of selling it to their core supporters. It hasn't been up until the last week or so that I've seen those grassroots organizing tactics that served him so well in the presidential race come to bear on the people that they're trying to get to come out to those town halls to be as passionate as the people on the right, the anti, to come out and make their voices heard.
But isn't part of Obama's communication problem here that he hasn't wanted to accept full ownership of it all because he wants Congress to have it come out and then he's going to decide what he likes and doesn't like.
That's part of the problem. You've got 3 or 4 different versions of this coming out, and part of the problem is that they're just trying to do way too much with this. And so you get this debate about death panels. It may be a phony debate, but the fact that there's even, we're even talking about legislation.
But don't you think you can understand the concept, as erroneous as it is, of a death panel more easily that you can understand how he's going to pay for it?
That shouldn't even be part of the They need to pare this down to the essential thing, which was to give people access to health care.
Is it like
is that the essential thing?
I think it is.
He's like an octopus. He's got 8 different things going. Cars for clunkers, health care, this, that. He's got to concentrate on some things.
Some people say that the core of it is to tell people first that I'm going to let you keep your same health care, and it may be cheaper, rather than stress that everyone's going to get it, and then say, and oh yes, other people will be eligible as well.
Well, he's tried that, but it hasn't really sunk in very much.
No, I don't think he tried that. I think his number one lead-off point was that everyone would be covered.
Well, he also said, just so you know, if you have a doctor you like, you have a program you like, I'm not going to take it away from you. It's yours. The trouble is, what he's tried to do is do this in this very collaborative style, the anti-Clinton program, the way that Clinton kind of, Bill Clinton and Hillary sat and devised this very complicated program. He tried to do it in the open air. It's really kind of blown up in his face because it's, as we've said, 4 different proposals.
Right, before we go on to the Olympics, you think it's going to pass? And if so, what passes?
What are you talking about?
What part? What part? Not the Olympics.
The healthcare?
The healthcare, right.
I have no idea because I'm sitting around going, well, what is it going to be? I mean, I'm following more the noise that's surrounding
don't
it
you
than...
think there'll be something passed and they'll call it reform?
I'm not sure.
Okay. David?
I would agree that something will pass. I think the administration will come back to this single-payer option. In other words, you can have the government option, and they've got the votes, really, in the Senate. They've got 60 votes. You ought to be able to pass something. It's just, do you want to take the political hit to do that, to do a one-party vote on such an important issue?
He'll get something because Obama's so invested in it, and he's so wary of the Clinton debacle that he's going to have to get something out of this.
Okay. The Olympics are now only 6 weeks away. The Tribune wrote a big editorial about all the things that are wrong with the way we're handling it, and chiefly among those is the fact that that it's not an open process. We don't know what it's going to cost.
Well, we don't. It's interesting. I've talked to people at the Olympic Committee, the Chicago 2016, and they all believe that they've been the most open and transparent group that has ever been seen in the face of the Olympic movement. And yet, you know, a few weeks away, 40-some days away from the October 2nd vote, we still don't know who these insurance companies are who are supposed to be guaranteeing the bid. We have no idea who any of the developers are of the potential Olympic Village. The guarantee that they're looking for, the unlimited guarantee from the city, we don't know much about. We've had a little bit of corruption or conflicts of, not corruption, but conflicts of interest pop up with this Michael Scott, this Olympic Committee member who is involved in a development near the village. It's just all kind of stirring around, and it doesn't smell very good to longtime Chicagoans.
And are there any polls that show whether the citizenry wants it?
There have been a variety of polls. The Olympic Committee are saying they're conducting no more polls, but they think the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, will be conducting polls leading up to the games. And they're quite concerned about the fact that at these community meetings, they've held meetings in just about all the 50 wards, that they've been very negative tone. They expected it would be negative, but it's been a little bit worse than
I'm going to
they
give you one sentence to argue the Chicago case versus Rio.
The Chicago case versus Rio, the U.S. is the biggest market in the world, and the Olympics movement loves the big U.S. market. You can rely on Chicago to put on a games that's going to be on time, on schedule, et cetera, et cetera. More so than Rio. No crime in the streets. A mayor that can do anything he wants.
David, as your English professor, I must say that's a run-on sentence.
Oh, did you ask for one sentence? I thought you said one breath.
We're moving on to sports. The Cubs stumbling down the stretch. Jay Cutler flops in his Bears preseason debut, and former Packer great Brett Favre is now a Viking. Mike North, did Jay Cutler really flop?
Yeah, he flopped, and not because of what he did on the field, but because he showed no leadership after the game. He basically said Devin Hester didn't go up hard enough for the football. He'll learn. It was a bad pass thrown off his back foot. Everybody knows the pass by now because basically, today he's fessed up and said it was a bad pass. He had to wait a week. Now, people are saying it's only an exhibition game. Well, if it's only an exhibition game, he just should have fessed up and said it was a bad pass.
Well, is this what was happening in Denver? Was he hanging out his receivers to dry?
He's known as immature, a lack of leadership. They needed to win one game of their last 3 last year, and they didn't win any. He couldn't get a touchdown in from the red zone. Never made the playoffs, 17 as 20 as a starter. Yet, the meeting this town, shamefully, has genuflected in front of this guy like he is Joe Montana, and he's not. And you know what? There may be 2 better quarterbacks in the division better than him.
And one, I guess, would be Brett Favre?
Absolutely.
And who's the other one?
Well, you got Brett Favre on Minnesota, Green Bay, you got Aaron Rodgers, who last year had 28 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, a 95 quarterback rating, as high as Brett Favre's had when he was a Green Bay Packer. He's going to be a Pro Bowler this year. So, I mean, it's a quarterback-rich division, Joe.
Yeah, Cutler was, what, 86? He wasn't bad, his quarterback rating.
No, 86, though.
And he played in a tougher division, did he?
Well, the Denver Broncos last year did not have a very good team. I'm going to step to his defense on that. What I said is he wasn't a bad quarterback. His leadership skills, as we saw the other night, Oh, and by the way, Devin Hester and the receivers did talk, and that can cause hard feelings when your supposed leader hangs you out to dry.
Is he right, though? I mean, Devin Hester is an underachiever as a receiver.
As a receiver.
As a receiver, but
so maybe he needed somebody to tell him that.
Well, you know what? Maybe he needed somebody to tell him that, but I think you keep it away from the newspapers. I think he should have talked to him. He says today it was his bad. So apparently he must have thought about it for a week.
Are we talking about this in such detail long before the season even begins?
Well, it's because of him.
Is it because of him, or is it because?
He's been hyped up like he was the Messiah.
Or is it because baseball is so failing in its expectations?
Well, it sounds like you're not a Sox fan.
Oh no, I am.
Because the White Sox are right there,
No,
for you.
I'm definitely
I noticed
a Sox
the Cubs.
fan.
All the talk was about the Cubs. About to talk to Mark about this. I didn't see where the White Sox basically a game and a half out. I know I'm screwing up the whole way.
No,
this show
don't worry about
done,
it,
Joe. But I'm trying
and by
to tell
dropping
you.
the magic word, Mark, that's our producer.
Yeah,
go ahead.
That's okay. But you know what? The Cubs are 6 games back, and you know what? I think they're done. I really don't think. I think that the Milton Bradley deal was a bad deal. Soriano makes $17 million a year. Zambrano, $92 million contract. For 5 years
So
to
what
go.
is the price for the Cubs being done? Is Piniella out of here? Is Hendry out of here?
No. Neither one will be out, but Henry's going to be the scapegoat for this one. They will be both there next year. They're going to have one more year because they made the playoffs 2 previous years.
Yeah, and what about and what about the White Sox? Do they really have a chance or not?
Oh, the White Sox are winning it, Joe. The White Sox are winning it, man. They're going to win it.
Well, but then how come they're 2.5 games behind the Tigers?
Well, basically, Joe, they're 2 games back, but you've broken my train of thought with your cell phone. I'm not happy about this. I mean, I know you're trying to hide it, but this is TV. Let's be honest about Mark. That's right. Mark, what the hell? What the hell was he talking about?
That's definitely Mark's fault.
But you know what, Joe? The Sox are going to win it. The Cubs are finished. The Bears aren't going to get into the playoffs. They're 9-7. Now you got the vibrator out. That's bad.
Mike, you're going to cost me my job here.
I'm just saying. I'm not the one with. I shut my phone off. I don't know what I got to tell you out here. And Patrick Kane.
And you don't even have that much sleep.
No. And Patrick Kane, by the way, is going to be arraigned. Can you believe that? The 20-year-old baby-faced kid is going to be arraigned. So I took over, Joe. I tried to keep
What do you
time.
think should have happened to Patrick Kane?
Well, should
the felony charges been the ones that he was indicted
for? If he
for,
wasn't Patrick Kane and he wasn't the son of Buffalo and hadn't been with the mayor 4 days before dedicating an ice rink, who knows what happens here? Because apparently something did happen, and the taxi cab driver, nice Polish man, 62 years old, all I want is a public apology. I mean, you know what a lot of people would have done. They would have sued, and rightfully so.
Well, don't you think he's going to end up filing some kind of a civil suit?
No, I don't think so. I think, you know what, I think he's going to move on.
You think he wouldn't like any of Patrick Kane's millions or the Black Hawk millions?
The man seems like a down-to-earth guy. He's probably, I don't know.
He didn't sound very down-to-earth when he was saying what happened.
Well, Joe, you can be down-to-earth and get beat up and be robbed. I mean, what do you have to have? A certain personality?
All right, so where will the Bears finish? Now they've already given the White Sox their division.
The Bears are going to probably... I thought they were going to finish 3rd, but now they're going to finish 2nd. Minnesota's going to finish 3rd.
Okay.
Favre's going to hurt them.
We're out of time. So for Esther Cepeda, David Greising, Bruce Stoll, and Mike North, who monitors my cell phone, I'm on Joel Weissman. We'll see you on the next edition of the Week in Review. Up next is John Calloway's 2006 interview with Broadway star Elaine Stritch. Good evening.